For all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon. Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, you all know, I am the SaWGuy, and you're joining me for episode 60, You're Next. Y'all knew it was coming. Slashers are one of my favorite types out of the whole horror genre. And with You're Next, I mean, it's instant classic. If you've never seen it, you're in for a treat. So without further ado, let's get this shit started.
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
My reign of terror was legendary.
Ya stutter, bitch?
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
You opened it. We came.
Oh, yes. There will be blood.
As I said with You're Next, I classify this film as a slasher film. But because this film was so great and it spun off various different films that fit that style of this movie, that they actually created their own genre. And some will argue and say, wait a minute, that is not a slasher film. It is considered a Mumble Gore film. I had to think and scratch my head for a second because I was just like, what the hell? What's a Mumble Gore, right? It's a play off of Mumble Core, I guess. And with Mumble Gore, it follows the whole premise of having really good stories and very character driven, and you know, obviously with the gore you're gonna have to up that up a notch. And then you have a twist at the end, and you know, when I think about it, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see that. But I mean, to me, I'll still see this as a slasher film, a good old classic slasher film. And I first heard about You're Next way back in the day in 2011 when they first started filming this, because this was just meant to be a straight independent horror film, wasn't meant to go out to be in worldwide with theaters and stuff like that. But they did this story so damn good, people were buzzing about it, you know? And when they released it in 2011, you had Lionsgate that came in and said, hey, we want to buy the film rights to, you know, play it worldwide. And the rest is history. But with You're Next, it did change a lot about it, you know, because the whole aspect that they did, I guess you could say small budget, low budget, but just the way that they put the story together just really made it pop, you know? And with You're Next, it's actually directed by Adam Wingard, and a lot of you guys might remember his work from VHS and all these other independent horror films that you see. And believe it or not, I was laughing at this because, you know, when I was doing my research, the writer of You're Next actually has a starring role in this film. He plays the Tiger Mask, the first guy in this one that, you know, gets hit in the head with a hammer and shit. I was like, what? He was the writer of this film? No shit, you know? So his name's Simon Barrett. And what's cool about him is that he wrote this whole story, and he said in his script that they've changed very little. I mean, some stuff, you know, for obvious reasons they had to change, but you know, most of the story was still intact. They even went as far as drawing animation boards and stuff like that of what's going to happen, the gore scenes, and as I do in every one of my episodes. I'm going to break it down for you, tell you the whole story of everything, throw in the little tidbits and things that you probably may know or probably may not know. I've seen this film many times, and as y'all know, when I research for any episode, I watch a movie about 100 times a week. And, you know, I was still seeing little pieces here and there and finding out new information like, holy shit, I did not know that. But anyways, with You're Next, what I love about this film is that it starts the story right away. So, you know, as soon as you start watching the film, it follows, you know, the typical slasher idea of, you know, two people in bed and they're having sex. They don't show anything, they just show the feet at the edge of the bed, and then you hear all the sounds and everything. And eventually, obviously, they finished up. Then you meet the two characters. You meet Eric and you meet Talia. Eric is played by Larry Fessenden, who has a lot of roots, I guess you could say, in the horror community and horror movies and stuff like that. Talia, she's played by Caitlin Shield. And, you know, after they had their little bit of fun, let's just leave it at that. Obviously, YouTube standards. And, you know, he gets up, you know, typical dude fashion, where he's, you know, he's like, I'm gonna take a shower. And, you know, she's just kind of like in disgust, just like, but further on in the story, it will explain what was the reason behind that, you know? And it shows she gets out of bed, you know, she gets her undergarments on and everything. She's walking around the house, and she thinks she hears a noise outside. And so, you know, she opens the glass door, sticks her head out, and she's like, what the hell? And then she's like, oh, probably the wind, because you see the wind chimes and shit move. Then she kind of walks up super fast to this old school CD player. I say old school CD player because I had the same fucking setup right now at my house. But anyway, she pops in a blank CD and she starts playing music, and she does, you know, the thing that I like to do is where you leave a song on repeat and you just play that song over and over, and so that way you kind of focus into your work. And she ends up playing Dwight Twiley's Looking for the Magic. I honestly have never heard of that song until I started watching this film, and you know, the song just fits the movie so well, and it's kind of funny because it's a poppy song. But anyways, you know, she's playing the music, and you know, she goes into the bar area, and she, I guess you could say, makes herself a screwdriver. She basically drops in the ice, throws in the orange juice, the vodka, and then she, you know, goes and kind of sits around, do her own thing, just like, you know. And then it shows Eric back in the shower. You know, he's still taking his long ass hot shower. Then as she's sitting there, the music kind of fades a little bit, and then she turns around. Then you can see Eric. He, you know, comes out of the shower and everything. He sees that her screwdriver drink is on the side, and he's like, you know, all right, whatever. He takes a sip. Then he starts staring at the window, just all weird. And what I thought was a trip was, you know, he's all staring at the window, and keep in mind, it's a house out there in the middle of nowhere. And they'll tell you where it's at after the story. But anyways, it's in the middle of nowhere. He's looking out the window, and he sees all this, like, blood and shit, and he's just like, what? And it spells "you're next," but he can't see it from the inside, only on the outside, which I thought was kind of funny. And, you know, then he's looking down, then he sees Talia, you know, she's obviously dead, looked like her throat was slit, and he jumps back like, oh. And then, you know, out of the blue, there's a dude wearing a lab mask who, you know, grabs him by the neck, and, you know, he's wearing nothing but a fucking towel on him, and he's screaming, blood splatters all over the window, and I was like, oh shit, you know, that's how they opened up the movie. You know, I was really impressed with it because you didn't know what to expect on that. And with that being said, you find out more about Eric and Talia and who they were and everything, because the next scene, you see an elderly couple. One of them is played by Barbara Crampton, and she plays Aubrey. And the other one, he is Paul, but he's played by Rob Moran. And they're like an elderly couple. They're, I guess you could say, going to their secondary house out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. They seem well off. You know, they're nice dressed and everything. And as they're driving, they see the house, you know, in the beginning that you just saw. And then they start talking about Eric, and they're like, well, yeah, you know, he's a teacher, and I guess the rumor is he, you know, divorced his wife to go end up being with his student. And, you know, Aubrey, you know, Barbara Crampton's character, she's like, oh, that is so awful. And it was just like, oh, shit, that's the reason why. So, if you think about it, I mean, now it explains a little bit about the beginning, why she was so disgusted, and he was just like, yeah, you know. Then it shows that they get to their house. It's just not your normal, you know, typical stereotype like cabin house. This is like a fucking mansion. And where they're at, they're actually, I guess you could say, you know, because the film says it was in Missouri. It looks almost like the Ozarks and everything like that, because they got a lot of dirt road, and then they go into the forest. But it's a huge fucking house. It's almost, the house almost reminds you of Home Alone in a way. So, you know, they grab their bags, they get up to the door, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, the door's open. And, you know, they don't think twice about it because, you know, they thought, okay, it's middle of nowhere, who the hell's gonna come in? So they come in, they see all the, you know, everything's covered, they're pulling the covers off, and they're all talking about like, oh, this is gonna be great, having all the kids over, and they're like, yeah. And then you meet two more characters, right? You meet AJ Bowen's character, who plays the character of Crispin. And then you meet his girlfriend, you know, his girlfriend is Erin, and she's played by Sharni Vinson. And Sharni Vinson, man, she was a babe in this movie. Not only was she a babe, but she was a badass in this. But anyways, it shows then that they're driving. It's obviously, you know, towards the end of the night and everything, late night. And they started talking about the family and everything. And, you know, Erin, she says, hey, I can't wait to meet your family. They implied that they were like a new young couple and everything like that. And Chris was just like, yeah, you might like him, you might not, you know, because he had two other brothers and a sister. And, you know, then she brought up the point where she was like, well, they must be well off if they own like a big old house out in the middle of nowhere. And this is the kind of cool twist that they played into this, where, you know, he's like, yeah, my dad used to work for the KGB. And they're all like, what? You know? And, you know, Eric, she looks at him like, KGB? And he's like, oh, yeah, but, you know, he worked in sales marketing and stuff like that. So they explained how he got the money, which I thought was really cool to the story, you know, that they explained that. And they start talking about, well, if your family is like that, you know, do they have booze over there? And Crispin's like, yeah, my mom, she's on medication. She doesn't drink. And that's when Aaron's like, can we stop somewhere real quick so we can get some booze? And he goes, yes, we're gonna have to. Yes. That's typical with all of us. We can all relate to that, especially the holidays. You're gonna go and see all the family members, relatives, and people you don't want to see, but you gotta see. We've all been there, Then it goes back to following Aubrey and Paul, the parents, of course. And, she's, tidying up the house and everything, getting it all nice and pretty. And then, she hears a noise, and then you see the chandelier move. And then she's like freaking out. And then all of a sudden, Paul comes in. He's like, hey, what's wrong? She goes, did you hear that noise? He goes, no, I was in the basement. And she's like, I think someone's upstairs.
No, I was in the basement.
And, she starts freaking out. She runs outside crying. And they implied that she had some sort of, I guess you could say, kind of depression that she was dealing with. And so then it shows Paul, he goes upstairs, and, he's looking all around. And then all of a sudden, that's when Crispin comes out of nowhere. And I'm like, what the fuck? How did he get here? And, even his dad said it, He's like, whoa, what the hell are you doing here, Crispin? He's like, well, I got here a while ago. I'm just trying to see, like, why is Mom outside in the front crying? And, they all come out. They all meet each other and everything. They meet Aaron. And eventually, it's towards the end of the night. And that's when they, start saying, okay, well, we're going to hit the sack and da-da-da-da-da. They all go to bed, and then Aaron starts talking to Crispin about, the whole family, like, oh, they seem sweet. I can't wait for tomorrow to meet the rest of your family. And, they're laying in bed. He's like, yeah. Then it shows Aubrey, I guess it's middle of the night, like late. She gets up, she goes in the kitchen, I guess gets a glass of water. And then out of the shadows, you see the tiger mask, like, pull up. And he's just like looking and staring her out through the window. And then he just kind of goes back and disappears. And it's like, oh shit, something's gonna happen right now. But then it doesn't. That's where they sell you for horror films and slasher films. And then all of a sudden it shows Crispin. He's like, half asleep. Then he wakes up and he's like, oh, and hears everybody talking in the morning and everything. Gets all dressed, he comes down. And now you meet, two more characters, which is his older brother, Drake, and his wife, Kelly. And, he comes down and he sees that Erin's already awake. She's already talking to them about everything. They're talking about their past when they were kids. Like, oh, yeah, Crispin, he was this fat little chubby boy and everything like that. And, when he sees his older brother, his older brother starts fucking with him like, hey, you think you can take me down, I mean, family stuff, right? We don't do it in my family, but I'm just saying, like, maybe some other families do that, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, they start talking and everything like that, he says hi to his wife and everything. And then they start talking more stuff about the past, like, he used to be a chubby kid, and, Crispin's like, I wasn't chubby, I just had a round face. The family shit that we all talk about, when we're sitting down at the table or whatever. But anyways, Erin gets up, and then she's like, I'm gonna go check on your guys' mom, see what she's doing. And so, obviously Aubrey, she's getting everything ready, she's washing the dishes, and she goes, oh, hey, is there anything I can do to help? And right off the bat, for me, I'm sold on the Erin character because she seems like a total sweetheart. She goes up and she's trying to do more for the family. She wants to, put in a good first impression. And Aubrey's just like, no, I'm good. Just blows her off. And then she was just like, oh, wait a minute. We're out of milk, so if you want to go, to the neighbors and get some milk, that'd be great. And then, Erin's like, okay, I'll be back then. I'll go get your milk. And as she's getting ready to go out, you see that there's Paul, Drake, and you also see Crispin. I guess they're staining a surfboard or some kind of wooden panel or something, and they're talking about stuff, hey, how's everything been, son, and that's when Erin comes out and she's like, oh, let me take a picture of you boys. So she takes a picture of them. And then she tells Crispin, well, your mom wanted me to go next door to the neighbors, grab some milk. And he's just like, really? Like, something seems off with him. Like, he didn't want her to go. And then that's when she was like, yeah, I'll be back real quick. And then, she does the fingers to the eyes like, I'm watching you. And as she walks away, that's when his older brother starts fucking with him. And you get the impression, with Drake being the older brother, he fucks with everybody. And mostly he picks on Crispin. And I think the reason being is just because he gives off that vibe of jealousy. And then afterwards he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go check on my wife, go check on Kelly, see how she's doing. And you find out a little bit more about what's going on with him. So he goes upstairs, and as he, comes into the room, you see his wife just bra and panties, getting ready for the day. And then she's like, close the fucking door! And he closes it, then he goes up to her, and he's kind of feeling the mood. He puts his arms around her, he's behind her. He tries to take off and snap off her bra, and she's like, ugh, not now. you know, and so it implies that they're on the rocks almost, you know, and they're just putting up an act for the family, and he's just like, ugh. You know, and he's like, do you have any Vicodin painkillers? And so you find out more about him is that he's a pill popper almost. They're all involved with their own demons. And that's what's cool about this story. It gives you all that depth into this, right? So now it goes back to Crispin and his dad, Paul, and they're talking, and you find out more about Crispin, how he was a writer, and he works at the school, and he teaches English, and how to write and all that. And, you know, he's had some books published. So his dad was asking him, hey, how did the fellowship go? And he's like, well, not good, you know, because haven't written anything, and, you know, they picked other people that have been published and all that. And, you know, his dad, typical dad stuff, like, well, people could still get published and get the fellowship without being published, you know, and I thought it was just like, damn, he freaking, like, put his ass down like that, you know. Typical dad stuff, I guess you could say, you know, every dad has done that, like, oh, well, you can do better than that, kind of attitude, right? And eventually, you know, it shows Erin, she's going back over there. It shows that she didn't drive, which I thought was kind of weird, because Eric's house, their neighbor, it looked like it was a clear 10-mile walk, you know, so she's freaking walking all the way down over there. And, you know, she goes up to the door and she's knocking. And she's like, hello, anybody home? And it shows Eric sitting at the chair, but he's already dead. So he's just sitting there just like, you know. And the whole crazy thing is they have the music playing of Looking for the Magic, just on repeat. It shows that she's walking up, the song has already ended, and then it repeats. And then after that, you know, she finally gets the point like, okay, I guess they're busy or whatever, because all the cars are out there. Obviously, you see 2 cars, which is his and Talia's. And then she's like, okay, well, fuck it, I guess no one's home or they're busy. And as she's walking away, I saw this one little hidden Easter egg. As she's walking away, if you see the first window closest to the door, you could see like a shadow walk by. And it was like, oh shit, it was one of the killers. Like, he was inside the house already waiting. And it was just like, is something gonna happen? Is something not gonna happen? I noticed that when I was going through and doing my research prepping for today, and I was like, oh shit! I didn't see that. I really didn't. If you've seen that, let me know in the comments below, because that shit blew me away. I was just like, whoa, there's a hint right there. And then eventually it goes back to the house, and you know, it's obviously late night, and then the rest of the family shows up. You see Amy, which is the youngest one, and she's the only girl, the daughter. She comes there with, you know, her boyfriend Tariq, who's played by Ty West. And, you know, what's cool about Ty West, he's another guy who's done a lot of work in the horror industry and with the horror community and everything. With a couple of his movies are well known, like I Saw the Devil. Obviously, he's done some work with VHS, and it's just like, oh shit, he's in this film too? So they go up and they say hi to the mom and everything like that. And then that's when you meet the other brother, who's the youngest one. His name's Felix, and you meet his girlfriend, Z. Felix kind of seems like the oddball of the bunch because they're all educated, they're all, you know, doing something, and Felix is just kind of like normal dress in jeans and shirt. And he's like, hi mom, and then she's like, Felix. And he's like, hi, yeah, and he's like, I brought my girlfriend, her name is Z. And, you know, he's pointing to her, and Z, she's kind of like this, I guess you could say, I wouldn't call it gothic, but she's kind of something where she's, you know, she's dark, I guess you could say. You know, she has the black Bobadoo haircut, she's smoking a cigarette, doesn't say anything, you know, she's smoking a cigarette and blows it out, and she just lifts up her head like saying, hi, you know, and she's like, well, okay, Z. And, it was funny because he's like, yeah, her name's Z with 2 E's at the end, Z-E-E. That's another thing about this film. They throw in a lot of dark humor, so if you paid attention, there's a little bit of dark humor, like the whole Z part and everything like that. And once they introduce themselves and stuff, you know, Aubrey's like, okay, come on, let's all go inside and get ready for dinner. And, you know, they all meet Crispin, Drake, everybody like that. And then the dad comes in and he's like, hey, I'm glad to see my little princess. And, you know, Amy comes in, hi dad, this is my boyfriend, Tyreek. I guess you could say it's foreign to me because my family doesn't do that. You know, when we all see each other, we're like, oh, hey, you know. But I mean, in this, I guess they hadn't seen each other, and it's implied that it was supposed to be, I guess, a semi-family reunion with just the monks themselves. And, you know, after that, the dad, you know, he has a bottle of wine. Who wants wine? They all raise their hand. Oh, I do. And he's like, oh, hey, how you doing, son? And instead of going up to his son and giving him a hug, he goes and reaches his hand out to shake, you know, Felix's hand and everything. I was just like, whoa, what the hell? But, I mean, it's different standards, right? We've all been there. And well, anyways, that's when Aubrey comes in and she's like, I have to tell you all, it's so important to us that you're all here for me and for us, you know, and then she walks away. And, you know, that's when Aaron's like, oh, your mom's so cute. And eventually, you know, they're sitting down at the table. They all say grace, you know, Paulie says grace to Dad. And he's like, I'm so happy that everyone's here, you know, Lord bless this food. You know, your typical grace before you eat. And as they start eating, that's when Drake, you know, kind of goes in asshole mode on this. And, you know, I'm pretty sure y'all can relate on this. So after they start eating, you know, he starts talking to Tyreek. He's like, oh, what do you do?
So Tyreek,
he's like, oh, I'm a, you know, I work in the film industry. I'm a director. And I thought it was like, oh, shit. You know, they're playing off of, you know, what he really does. Kind of a humor joke with that. And then Drake comes back and he's like, so what work have you done? And he's like, well, I've done, you know, a documentary at this underground film festival. And he goes, oh, what's an underground film festival? Do they play movies underground? You know, I don't know if that was a smart ass remark or what. And then that's when he was like, no, it's a documentary. And, you know, then that's when he starts saying like, well, I don't watch documentaries, but, you know, you should do commercials. I watch, you know, TV only for the commercials now these days. And, you know, but he tells him, but then he turns around and tells him, well, you know, I get it. You want to be the starving artist kind of thing. And then Amy's like, starving artist? And, you know, they kind of bickered a little bit. And then that's when you see Crispin and Aaron kind of having their own fun and everything. And then he turns on to Crispin, and then so he's like, oh yeah, so Aaron, you know, you're still in school? And she's like, yeah, I'm almost done with my master's and everything. And he's like, oh. He goes, were you a student of Crispin's? And she goes, I was, but it's unprofessional, so we stopped. And then that's what Crispin said too. And then, you know, he's looking at his glass of wine, he's like, oh, a little unprofessional. And he starts taking a sip of his wine. And then that's when Crispin's like, the fuck you talking about, man? And then he's like, oh, I didn't say anything. But then they all started bickering. And what I thought was kind of cool about this whole bickering scene is that they all improvised it. I thought it was pretty cool because, you know, I don't know how you could improvise that, but the fact that they were all bickering back and forth, and then Tyreek, you know, he's just kind of sitting there just like, oh, I want to get the fuck out of here. We all been there too, right? And he gets up because he sees something in the window. And he's looking outside the window and he's like, what the fuck is that? Then all of a sudden the arrow just shoots right through the glass, and you hear the glass break, and then it smacks him right in the forehead. And nobody hears it because of the fact that it's an arrow from a crossbow, and they're all bickering like really loud and everything. And then that's when they all got quiet and they see Tyreek, you know, he's just like, oh, trying to pull the arrow out of his head, and he falls down dead, and they're all like, ah! And this is where like the full-on panic mode goes off. And which I thought was pretty badass, because now at this point you don't know what to expect. Like, oh shit, someone's shooting fucking arrows inside the house. So they're all panicking, they're all getting down and everything like that. As they're getting down, Drake, he gets hit in the back with an arrow, and then the arrows just keep coming. So they start freaking out and they all get under and they say, what the fuck are we gonna do? Aaron takes charge, she's like, get down, get down. And, you know, Felix and Z, they're on the side and they're all like, call the cops, call the cops. They pull out their phones. Keep in mind, this is 2011, so they had just your plain Jane phones. It wasn't fancy. They didn't have any iPhones, smartphones, any of that shit. And so they're all trying to dial and everything. They're all like, we can't dial out. There's no signal. And then freaking Felix is like, oh shit, they must be using a cell phone scrambler. And everyone's like, what? And he's like, a cell phone scrambler, you get them for like $30 off the internet. And Drake's like, you fucking loser. So they're all bickering and shit about like all this madness that's going on, and they don't know what the hell to do. So they finally said, okay, Aaron, she came up with the idea of saying, okay, grab a chair, walk across the window, so that way if an arrow comes, it's gonna hit it, so that way it protects you guys. So little by little, they all walk through the window so they don't get hit, and the arrows are still coming, you know, hitting the picture on the wall. And eventually they all go in this other room by the front door. And, you know, then they start arguing. They're like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And they all said, well, we gotta do something to get the fuck out. And with that being said, they all came up with the idea, well, one of us should just make a run for it. I mean, we could just run to the neighbors, because they don't know that Eric is dead. And that's when they all come up with the idea, hey, let's just run. And they're trying to decide who's gonna run. And Crispin's like, well, I can run. And then Drake's like, no, you're a fat ass. You've always been fat. You can't run. And Felix is like, I can't run. I got asthma. And then that's when everyone's just like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Amy, she's over there crying, you guys don't ever give me any credit. And, you know, I love that scene because, you know, when families are tested, They're all at each other's throats. I can vouch for that, knowing my family. And finally, they all decided that Amy was going to go because, you know, she was saying, well, I used to run the mile in like 20 minutes flat. I can get through it pretty quick. So she takes off all her jewelry, her scarves and everything. And then that's when Felix moves the table. He's like, all right, we're going to give you a running start. They move the table. They break the fucking vase. And Felix and Paul, they're at the door and they're like, okay, don't open the door until like when she's close to it. That way they won't expect her to run out. And that's when Paul, you know, his dad was like, okay. And so they show in slow motion, she's, you know, at the edge of the hall. And she gets a running start and they show in slow motion, she's running. And then at the last second, they open the door and she doesn't see it coming. All of a sudden, whack, right on her fucking neck. And she falls flat on her back. And she's like, ugh. And what they did, they fucking put a wire right there. So when they opened the door, they were going to smack right there in their neck. And, ooh, man, it fucking cut right through like half of her neck. And so everybody's all freaking out like, oh, what the fuck happened? What the fuck happened? Paul pulls her in and she's just like trying to grab her neck and everything and she fucking dies right there. Aubrey goes crazy because she's the mom. She's like, no! And that's when they don't know what the hell to do at this point. And then that's when they close the door. Aaron looks through the window and she sees the wire still moving. You can hear the sound just like wah, 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 blood dripping and everything off of it. And that's when they're like, oh shit, something's not right. And Paul, you know, he's like, okay, I'm gonna take your mother upstairs so she can just rest this off and everything like that. So, you know, Paul, he takes Aubrey upstairs and, you know, she's bawling her eyes out. She's hysteric about this. But she saw her daughter get, you know, her throat slit open. And that's when she lays her down, and then, you know, that's when she's still crying and everything. Like, as they're discussing on what to do, Paul comes back in, and then that's when Aaron tries to take charge. And she says, okay, well, if we can't get any cell phone reception, this is what we're going to do. And this is where she goes complete badass. Find anything that could be a weapon, and let's go ahead and let's, you know, make a sign hanging out the window so that way people could see it. And everyone's like, whoa, you actually know how to do, you've been in situations like this? And, you know, she's walking around the house and everything. She's grabbing knives and all that shit, gearing up and everything. Paul's, like, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. It goes back to Aubrey where she's on the bed, and she's crying. And then all of a sudden, as she's crying, you see just somebody slide underneath the bed slowly. And, you know, it's building up that anticipation. You hear kind of like an animal growl. And it's this guy dressed up, you know, all in very stealthy, and he's wearing a fox mask. And as he comes up, you know, that's when he pulls out the machete, like ready to hit her, and then she screams, ah! And everyone's like, what the fuck was that? So they all go running upstairs and everything like that. And when they open the door, you know, they can't open it because it's blocked. And so Paul's like flipping the fuck out. He's like, I can't open the door. Whack! You know, kicks the door in and everything. And then they see on the bed that Aubrey, she was killed with a fucking machete stuck in her forehead, and then on the wall painted in with her blood that said, you're next. And it was like, oh shit. When this is going on, you see Erin, she's still trying to gear up, locking all the windows and everything like that with the knife. And the dude in the tiger mask, you know, he breaks through the window, grabs her by her hair, she's like, ah! She had a knife in her hand, she fucking stabs him right through the arm. And, you know, the guy's stuck right there on the wall, he's screaming, ah! Ah! And as that's going on, you know, she, you know, opens another drawer, grabs another knife, turns around, he's already fucking gone. And then that's when it goes back to how they're all like freaking out at the fact that Aubrey's dead. And Paul, he's just like, no, oh God, no. Runs down, and, you know, all the brothers, you know, Crispin, Drake, and Felix, they're all kind of hanging around each other and everything. And Kelly was the only one that stayed by, and Kelly is Drake's wife. So she was just like, oh man, this is all fucked up. So she gets a blanket, tries to cover her up and everything. Then she looks out the window to see, like, okay, how the fuck did this happen? She's looking out the window, she looks down, she's like, whoa, this is a 2-story house. That's a long fucking walk. And a big drop, if anything. And as she, you know, locks the window and everything, she hears a noise. And so she's looking around. And then finally she goes underneath the bed and she's looking, you know, very slowly. And then all of a sudden, that's when you see the fox mask jump out. Boom! And she screams, ah! Ah! And what I thought was crazy about this scene is that she flipped the fuck out. I don't know how she got around him and then ran out the door. But she ran out, she's coming down the stairs, and she's running in fucking heels of all things. Just click, 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 click. Ah! She opens the door, ducks underneath the wire, and runs just out in the middle of nowhere in the forest in fucking high heels of all things. And then that's when Drake is chasing after her. He's like, Kelly, stop, Kelly. He's running after her. He bends down, but he doesn't realize that instead of an arrow on his back, the arrow hits the wire, and then he's like, oh, fuck. And I guess it loosened it up because then he puts his arm right behind his back, rips it out, and he looks at it, and he fucking passes out from the pain. And it was just like, holy shit, what the fuck happened? Now that they're all kind of grouped by the front door, that's when Crispin's like, hey, I'm the only one that's good. I'm gonna go out there and try and see if I can save and get Kelly. And Aaron's like, what the hell are you talking about? We'll all go together. And then that's when Crispin, kind of gets in her head, well, who's gonna take care of Dad? Who's gonna carry everybody else who's injured? Are you gonna carry Drake? And she's like, okay, you got a point. And so she gives him a meat cleaver, and then, she opens the door, lets him run out. Then it shows Kelly finally made it to Eric's house, the neighbor's house, and she gets to the window. And what I thought was interesting about this part, this is the same fucking window that had "Your Next" painted on it in blood, right? And Talia was dead on the floor, so obviously they cleaned it up and everything like that. And, it shows that Kelly, she gets up to the back window, she sees Eric leaning on the couch, and she's pounding the door. Sir, open the door! Open the door! What the fuck is wrong with you? Open the fucking door! And as she's doing that, she sees the shadow in the reflection of the landmass who's like sitting right there, and she's like, oh shit. She turns around, he fucking decks her right in the face. She goes right through the window. And then that's when, she's like, because she has glass and shit all over on her. He goes and then he picks her up by her head and throws her again. And, at this point, she's all fucking knocked out. And that's when, when she's knocked out, he gets this big-ass axe and he lines up her head and he does it and he swings it in a way like he's golfing, like, whack, right in her skull. And it was fucking crazy because you hear the sound effects and everything. And after that, you hear him breathe. And I thought it was pretty cool because there was a lot of winks to various different films. The heavy breathing is obviously a wink to Michael Myers. And, it shows that after he did that, he's just like... And he goes and sits on the couch next to Eric, and he's just like staring at his work. Which I thought was, I don't know, it was kind of different. I thought, oh shit, okay, there's a wink out there to Michael Myers for this. But, the fact that he was sitting down next to Eric is just like, that's kind of a unique thing, I guess you could say. Then it shows Crispin comes back and then he's like, hey, I couldn't find Kelly. There's an issue with the car. None of them are starting. And that's when they start kind of grouping up. And then that's when Crispin says, okay, look, I'm going to go away and try to run into town, do whatever I can to get all this shit situated. And that's when they all agree, okay, Crispin, go ahead and go. And as that's going on, Paul's like, hey, I'm going to go upstairs. Something's not right. I mean, I feel like this guy who killed my wife is still here in this house. So he leaves, and that's when Erin, she's like, okay, let's go and get anything that we can as a weapon because these guys mean fucking business. She goes and gets a knife, a meat hammer, and everything like that. And as she's walking, all of a sudden, Kelly's dead body flies through the window and it hits her. She's like, ugh, throws all the knife and all the weapons on the ground. Then you see Z and Felix like, oh shit, and they fucking run to the corner and hide. And then you see Tiger Mask come out, and he's holding the big-ass axe and everything like that. And, as she's on the ground, she turns around, and she's like, oh, shit. Swings the axe, whack, misses it, in between her legs. She rolls over, grabs the meat hammer, hits him on the fucking knee, and he goes down like, oh. And then she hits him in the head like 3 times before he finally collapses on the ground, and she sits on his back, beating the shit out of him in the head, like, whack, 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 whack. And, then when she's, finally done, you see Felix and Z walk around. And that's when she, grabs him by his shirt in the back, pulls the mask off. Anyone recognize him? And Felix is like, well, it's hard to tell. Another dark humor joke because of how many times she hit him in the fucking head with his meat hammer. And then that's when she's like, okay, something's up here with this. And then she starts talking to Felix, and then she's like, hey, wait a minute, where'd your dad go? And as they start discussing that, then all of a sudden, all the power goes down. And then that's when they're like, oh shit, what do we do? Then Aaron's like, well, where's your fuse box? And Felix is like, well, it's down in the basement. Well, we'll go down in the basement. She goes, no, I'll go down in the basement. So she goes down in the basement, and then it goes back to Paul, where he's kind of looking around in the house. And what's crazy is that he goes into these oddball rooms. This mansion's so fucking big, they have rooms that they don't go into. He goes into a room, and he goes into the closet. And then he pulls out like a water bottle, and it's all yellow, and he's like, what the hell? And obviously it's pee in a water bottle. Somebody's been staying there watching them. And then that's when the power kicks on. And that's when, you know, he sees Felix and Z, and then he's like, hey, I don't know if you guys know this, but this is a premeditated thing. And, you know, somebody's been watching our family, and I don't know what's going to happen. So y'all need to go out for safety. That's when the fox mask comes in and just gashes him from behind on his throat. And it was fucking crazy. And they did that right in front of Felix. And Felix is just like, you know, all shocked because all the blood is splattered on his face and everything. And the twist on this is that once his dad finally dies, like, he's grabbing him and everything, and he's like stepping back, and he's looking at his dad as he's dying, and his eyes dilate. And then that's when he looks at Fox Mask, and you find out later his name is Tom. You know, he looks at him and he goes, did you have to really do that in front of me? And, you know, he pulls up the mask and everything, and he's wearing freaking, you know, headphones, and he pulls it out, he goes, what'd you say? But the twist here is that fucking Felix knew. And it's like, oh shit, how did fucking Felix knew about he was gonna come and kill his dad? And it explains why their mannerisms are kind of just like, okay, they're very distant. They're very more, I guess you could say, not laid back, but more distant and staying away from things. And, you know, you're starting to find out a little bit about the story, a little bit more of the twist of it. As that's all going down, the power's finally back on, and then Erin, she, you know, walks around the basement, goes up the stairs and everything, and that's when the lab mask comes in. He's looking around with his crossbow, and then he sees that Tiger Mask is down. He starts flipping the fuck out. He's like, no! No! Flips over the table, no! Throwing shit around and everything like that. And then Erin, she hears all the sounds and all the noise and the footsteps. So she's basically hiding behind the door and everything. And she's looking through this old school keyhole, just like, okay, you know, what the hell's going on? Then you see Lab Mask, you know, he looks through the keyhole and she's like, no! Holding the freaking... holding the door handle, because it's those old school door handles, like the long curved ones. And, you know, he can't open it, so he's like, ah! Gets the axe and he starts breaking through the fucking door. And what I thought was cool about that is that it was a wink to The Shining. And I thought, oh shit, they threw it a wink to The Shining, a nod to that. That was pretty cool. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, because of when Drake passed out with the arrow, they pulled him in and then they tucked him away behind like the curtains and stuff. He wakes up all half out. And he, you know, he looks at Lab Mask, he's like, oh, hey. And then he's like, whoa, hold on. And he's backing up because Lab Mask is coming after him. And then that's when Erin, she grabs a screwdriver, opens the door, stabs him in the fucking back, and he's like, oh! And then all of a sudden he looks at both of them and says, fuck this, and ran out. And that's when Felix and Z come back in. They're all like, what the hell happened? And, you know, she's like, well, where's your dad? Oh, he's asleep upstairs, you know? And now you're starting to see a little bit of the story kind of unfold. Because, you know, he obviously just lied to her about that. But then, you know, she said, well, one of the killers came in and I stabbed him and he ran out the front door. And it was funny because, you know, Felix, he was just like, you stabbed him? And she goes, yeah. And he's like, with what? A screwdriver. Like, yeah, she fucking stabbed him. And that's when they start kind of gaming up and saying, okay, well, we need to go downstairs in the basement. There's more tools down there. We could probably grab some tools, makeshift some shit, and use it to protect ourselves, right? And so as they go down there, they find a board, some nails, a bunch of other random tools and everything. And then that's when she says, okay, I need you to stay down there with Drake and you guys build some shit down there to protect ourselves. That's when Z and Erin go back upstairs. They get a board and they start putting nails through it. And Z hardly ever talks through this whole fucking film. And she finally talks. She goes, well, how do you know so much about this? Erin explains, back in Australia, right after I was born, my dad started to think that resources are going to dry up soon. So I grew up on a survivalist compound, and my dad taught me how to survive out in the wilderness in case if anything happened. And she said, by the time I became a teenager, I moved to the States with my mom. And, you know, she was talking about, like, he taught me, like, a lot of these different things. And one of them was obviously the board with nails. And so they didn't just put board with, like, fucking nail here, nail there. They put, like, 3 in the middle, like, 2 on the end. And as they're doing all that, it goes back to Felix and Drake. And Drake, he's all kind of out of it, like, he doesn't know that his wife is dead. Keep in mind that. And that's when Felix, he gets these work gloves and he starts putting them on, and he lays out all these screwdrivers. And then that's when he says, you know, to Drake, like, oh, well, you can't go check on Kelly. She's already dead, man. And that's when Drake's like, what? And he starts, like, tearing up and crying and everything. He goes, I didn't want you to find out this way, man. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you like this. And that's when he's, like, having his moment where he's like, shut up! Shut the fuck up, Felix! Just shut up! I don't want to talk! And Felix fucking stabs him with a freaking screwdriver, and he's just like, ooh. And he's looking down, and you see this big-ass screwdriver, and, you know, he picks up another one. Boom, 2. Boom, 3. And he's like, why don't you just die? This is hard enough for me already. 4, 5, 6. And he has like 7 screwdrivers in his chest. And keep in mind, he had a fucking arrow on his back, and he got fucking knocked out already, you know? And, you know, eventually he just falls over after he's all teared up and everything from the pain and just knocks over. And then they show that Felix takes off the gloves. And I was like, oh shit, there's another thing that I missed. As many times as I've seen this film, I didn't see that part, but he was trying to cover up his tracks. Then it goes back to Z and Aaron. And, you know, Aaron, she's setting up all the boards by the window and everything like that. So she sets up one board, sets up another. And Z, she grabs the third board, and she's walking right behind Aaron. And then she raises it up like she's going to hit her. And then Aaron turns around, she's like, oh, here you go. And then that's when she's like, oh, you got that board ready? Oh, yeah, it's all good to go. And she's like, all right, well, I'm going to go and check and get this thing done. You want to go ahead and finish up making up more boards? And she goes, yeah, I got you. And that's when she just drops the fucking boards and everything and walks away. And now it's kind of implied that not only is Felix in it, but Z's in it too. And it's like, whoa, hold on, you know, who's a mastermind in this? And I'll dive more into that in a bit, because like that definitely plays a role in it. But anyways, you know, she starts going upstairs, and Aaron, she goes through the door, and she sees that there's extra blood marks and stuff going into Aubrey's room. And, you know, she goes and sees that Paul's dead. And then she's looking down, and she's like, what the fuck, they lied to me. And she starts freaking out about this and starts thinking about things. And then that's when the fox mask comes in there slowly, and, you know, she senses that he's there, and she turns around, and then he's just standing there with a machete ready to fucking, like, swing at her. And then that's when she throws this, you know, the meat hammer, throws it, jumps out the fucking window from 2 stories, lands on the ground, ugh! And that's when she's looking up, and she sees that the fox mask, he looks down to look at her, and she starts flipping out. So she's like, oh shit. So she goes out into the woods, and, you know, at this point, she knows something's up with her leg. She sits by a tree, and there's a big-ass piece of fucking glass sticking out. So she's like, oh, and she's not trying to be loud, and she's, like, biting down really hard, and she's pulling it out, and you can hear just, like, she's hearing noises. Turns around, and ends up being Lab Mask, and he shoots a fucking, you know, arrow right at her, misses, and she's like, oh, shit, and she starts running around the forest to fucking get away from everything. So she doesn't know what to do, so she runs back into the house and grabs whatever piece of cloth that she had and everything, runs into the bathroom and hides out, and that's when she makes her own tourniquet and everything like that. And as she goes back to the house, Lab Mask is following her, and he goes through and he sees the busted window. And, you know, he sees down there that there's the board with nails, and he's like, oh, fuck that, I'm not going in there. And, you know, he's like, I'm not stupid. And what he didn't realize that, you know, he's wearing his mask, so it has a little tiny eye hole, so he doesn't see it. So he walks in, and he puts his foot down, and he doesn't see the second one, like, closest to the window. And all of a sudden, you see the nail go right through his foot. And, if you've never stepped on a tack or a nail, that fucking shit hurts. So that's when he starts screaming, "Ooh!" When he's sitting down, he's like trying to kick it off. Oh, you motherfucker! Oh man, I was fucking cringing. That was the worst scene for me in this film, because I fucking stepped on a nail like that once. Then it shows that Felix, Z, and the Fox Masks are up in the room, and that's when they start hearing the noises and everything. And that's when Felix, you know, he goes up to the Fox Mask. He's like, hey, you mind checking that out? I mean, this is what I'm paying you here for. And that's when, you know, Tom is his name. He looks at him and he's like, puts the mask on and walks away, and he goes, yeah, gee, thanks. Then Felix ends up sitting on the bed next to his mom, who's already dead, obviously. And Z comes up, and she tries to get a little freaky with him. She takes off her shirt, and she's like, oh, I want you to do me right here next to your dead mom. And he's like, no, we ain't doing that shit. And she goes, oh, well, what, you don't want to be adventurous? He goes, that's not fair to me. And he pushes her off, and I was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, a little different there. I was like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, to be honest with you. And then after Felix pushes her away, you know, he starts running downstairs to see what the hell's going on. And you see Tom, he's holding the board, and that's when, you know, the Lamb Mask guy, he pulls the board out, and then he takes off his boot, and then Felix is like, whoa, don't get your fucking DNA all in here, man. He goes, oh, I'm gonna clean all this shit up, just like all the rest of this fucking mess. And Felix is kind of arguing with him at this point, because then he starts telling him, he goes, man, you can't, what the fuck I'm paying you guys for? You can't even fucking get a girl right, dude. She's over here kicking your guys' ass. And, you know, I had to go downstairs in the basement to kill my own brother because you couldn't fucking handle the job. And That's what pissed off Lab Mask, and he gets up, he goes, what? He goes, you want to talk about brothers? That right there is my dead brother. And so now you find out that the guy in the Lab Mask and the guy in the Tiger Mask, they're brothers. And then he's like, whoa, I didn't know you guys were brothers. I mean, I knew you guys both served in the military together, but I didn't know you guys were brothers. And that's when he comes up to him and he goes, unlike you, I like my brother. And, that's when he, puts him in a chokehold, like right there at the wall. And he goes, what's stopping me from killing you right now? And then he's like, I'll pay you more. I'll pay you more. It's only fair. I'll give you his share. So that way it's 500,000 for you and an extra 200 for you over there for Tom. And, that's when he looks at Tom, the guy in the fox mask. And he's like, well, shit, dude, we've already come this far, man. And then he's like, you better fucking pay. And he goes, well, if I wasn't getting paid that much money, do you think I'd be doing this? That's when they all agreed that they were going to put their differences aside and kind of finish the job. And then all of a sudden, that's when Aaron's cell phone goes off and, it goes beep, 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 beep. And, she's like digging through, like, trying to look for her cell phone. She pulls it out and it says 911 emergency gone through because she shot a text 911, and it finally went through. Old phones had a habit of doing that shit, really. And that's when they hear her, and that's when they're like, fuck, she's still around here. And during the whole time of the argument, Aaron heard everything. And so she's just like shocked that it's just like, oh shit, that they had this whole plan to kill everybody to fucking get the family inheritance. And, it goes to show you that this story was really good because it plays off of the dad being, he worked for KGB, and they were going to play it off that it was a bunch of these people that came in and killed him because of his work for the KGB. And it was just like, oh, fucking genius, man. like as I said, there's layers of this story, man. And, if you pay attention to it, it's just fucking crazy. Eventually, she's still hiding out. And then the guy in the fox mask, Tom, he ends up finding her, and he's like looking behind all these curtains and all this shit. And that's when he thinks he sees her, and he's getting ready to wind up. Aaron's right there, and she fucking punches him in the throat, knocks him down. She runs out of the house and then runs around to the other side, and they're all like, fuck, where did she go? Where did she go? And Felix, Z, and the guy in the lab mask, they're all running all around. And eventually, then you find out that the dude in the fox mask, he's coming right behind. And they're all just like trying to group up, like, fuck, okay, you guys split up this way, you stay at the house, you do this. And, they're trying to figure out where the hell Aaron went. And so it shows that the lab mask, he stayed behind, and he's looking around, and he thinks he hears the sound. So, he ends up going close to the window, putting his head out. He looks one way, looks the other, and then whack! Aaron puts a fucking steak knife through his fucking head. He's just like, ugh, and falls over, and she grabs the axe and everything, ready to hit him again if he got back up. But the steak knife went right through his fucking mask and right through his skull, dude. Just intense. I mean, because you don't expect that, just out of the blue. After that whole event went down where she ended up killing the guy in the lab mask, then that's when she goes back downstairs and, she finds a brick, she finds some twine, and she closes the front door and she jerry-rigs it in a way to where the axe is hanging up on top and it has the weight of the brick to, come down and smack him in the face when they open the front door. Then it shows that there's Felix, Z, and Tom, and they're out there talking and arguing about things like, okay, well, what if we fucking got seen by the cops? The cops could be coming. He's like, well, then we just split off and do this and do that. And he goes, you know the plan. And he's like, you take care of the girl and everything like that. I'll try and take care of her over here. And he's like, well, give me the crossbow. We don't have any weapons, no machetes. He's like, you know how to use that thing? They implied that Tom was kind of like this chill, laid back, I guess you could say almost stoner-like dude, where he's just like, all right, man, like, yeah, you do good on that. And he was just like, he was just there, And it's kind of funny because he was one of the most iconic characters of this movie. You see the mask all over in promotions and shit like that. And then eventually they all break away. Aaron's kind of like waiting for them at the front door. And then that's when Tom comes through the window, and then she's like, shit. And as she sees him, he's, crawling through the window and everything, she ends up running down to the basement. And this is what I thought was fucking cool, is that she set up a trap for him. She grabs a piece of log, she's running down the hallway in the basement, and she starts breaking all the glass light bulbs. And, she gets to the end where Drake's body's at, and on the table, she pulls out her camera and she starts setting it up. And she's setting it up to do, like, repetitive, I guess you could say flash, so it's, like, flashing all the time, right? And she's laying low, like, in the corner. So as Fox Mask comes out, or Tom, he starts hearing the flashing of the sounds. He's like, oh, what the fuck? He goes down because the way the basement's set up, you got to go down, and then you got to go this way, and it's a hallway that goes to, like, a bigger room in the basement. And as he's walking down the hallway, you know, he sees the flash, and it's getting like to the point where it's starting to blind him, and he's just like looking down like this. And she comes up right behind and hits him with the back of the head with a fucking log, just bam. And, you know, he's at this point already having a seizure because of seeing the flashing light. And every hit that she's hitting him in the head with, it's going with the flash. So you hear the sound of the flash, whack, flash, whack, flash, whack. It's to the point where she fucking smashed his face in. Worse than the guy in the tiger mask. You know, you couldn't even recognize his face. The mask was all fucked up and all that shit. And it was brutal. But what I thought was cool is that they didn't have to show much of it. They just kept showing a lot of flashing of it and the fact that she was beating the shit out of him with it. And she gets up, and now at this point, you know, she's just like, all disgusted with herself because of what she had to do to survive. Eventually, she comes back up, and she almost forgets about Z and Felix. And as she's going through, Felix has a crossbow, and he sees her in the hallway, you know, from the outside. He shoots through the window, and he thinks he hits her, and he's like, all right, I got her. They go through the window, and they're like, where the fuck did she go? Oh, fuck. So he ends up giving the crossbow to Z. He goes to his car, and remember the joke about the whole, you know, cell phone scrambler? He had it in the trunk of his car. He pops open his trunk, turns off the scrambler. Z goes in the kitchen, and Aaron knocks off the crossbow on her hands. And that's when they start scuffling and everything. Then that's when Felix comes in, and, you know, he's like, what the hell's going on? And she's holding her in a chokehold, and she grabs the pot of water and throws it right at Felix. And Felix is like, oh! And he goes, and he looks at her and he goes, stupid bitch, it's not even hot. And then he slips, bam! I was dying at that, man. I don't know, it was just a random humor point that you just didn't expect it to happen, you know? She threw hot water on him and it was cold. And she was freaking out, just like, oh. And then he fucking slips. And as they're, you know, fighting back and forth with the scuffle, that's where Felix pulls out his pocket knife and he stabs Aaron in the back. And she's like, ah! And she ends up punching him. And as, you know, he backs off for a sec, then she hits him in the head with this old school blender, like with the glass tray and everything like that. And the shit's all stuck in together because it was old school. She hits him in the head, it shatters. And, you know, that's when he's like on the ground, just like, ugh, you know. She grabs the blade, stabs it right in his head, and then plugs the shit in. And so she basically scrambles his brains with the blender, just like, yeah! And he's just screaming, ah! Ah! And I thought it was a unique kill to any freaking horror film. Like, what the fuck is heads in a blender? I haven't seen that shit since Dead Alive. Very unique, very different. Just like, what the fuck? Like, because you don't expect it. And that's when Z is like looking at Aaron. She's like screaming, ah! Aaron just says, fuck it. Pulls the knife right out of her back and then just stabs Z right in the head. And Z goes down. Then there's a moment where they're all just like, you know, obviously Z and Felix are dead. But then Aaron's just like, oh, you know, like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden, Felix's phone starts going off. She goes in his pocket, pulls it out, opens the phone up, and it ends up being Crispin. And Crispin, you know, here's another twist to this. Crispin, he's like, hey, man, everything good in there? You know, I want to make sure everything's good because it's fucking cold out here. And, you know, just want to get the job done. Just want to get the job done. So now the twist is that Felix and Z were in on it, but also Crispin was in on it, too. And it was like, what the fuck? So they had a plan to kill the family so they get the inheritance. And they hired these henchmen, obviously Tom the Fox mask, the Lamb mask, the Tiger mask. They were going to come in and make it look like a KGB assassination where they go and kill the family and everything. And apparently to Crispin, the plan was to kill everybody off except Crispin, Aaron, Z, and Felix. They were going to be the 4 survivors. And they were going to play it off to Aaron that it was just, you know, he wasn't a part of it, right? And Aaron, she hears the whole plot as he's like talking on the phone. And instead of hanging up the phone and actually trying to do something about it, he's still on the phone like, Felix, where are you? Like, it's cold as hell. What the fuck happened in here? I'm in the house. It's all tore up. And all of a sudden, you know, he hears the phone go off. He turns around and he sees that it's Aaron covered all in blood. And, you know, she hangs up the phone and he goes, whoa, 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 whoa. I know what it looks like. But here, let me explain this to you. You know, and then that's when he starts telling her like, hey, me and Felix, we got involved in this. Think about what you're doing because of the fact of, you know, we're doing this because we want the inheritance money. I know we all struggle with our own money bills and everything. And then that's when he starts playing into her emotions.
He's insane.
And he's saying, hey, you know, now you can pay off your loan. You don't have to do that stupid bartending job. We can go on a vacation together. We'll blow all this off like nothing ever happened. And, you know, that's when he's trying to butter her up, I guess you could say, you know? And as he goes in there and he's like trying to talk to her and everything, she's crying. And she's like almost hysterical, just not saying a word because she's just so shocked about it. Then he goes up to her and tells her, hey, the whole plan was to never hurt you. And she responded, just like in complete disgust, just like, so you had this plan to kill everybody. And I got in the middle of this, and I could have gotten hurt. And that's when he says, well, hell, I didn't know that you were fucking trained like this. Like, hello, we've been together how long? And they imply that they were a young couple. I guess you could say they were about maybe a year into the relationship, maybe a little bit less. I'm not sure. They didn't explain too much in that detail. And as he's still trying to butter her up, you know, she has a knife in her hand, and she fucking stabs him in the throat. And, you know, he's gasping for air, and it's all gushing. Why? And she looked at him, and she said, why the fuck not? And she fucking stabs him right in the eye with that knife. Whoosh! And he goes down. And before she could do anything, she turns over to the corner. Boom! She gets shot in the other fucking shoulder and goes down. And you see that she got shot by a cop. And, you know, he hit her with a, 38 revolver. And he's just like, what the fuck? And it shows that the cop goes back to the squad car. And he, calls for backup and says, hey, it's a mess out here. And he's just freaking out, just like, because it was a bloodbath at this point with everybody all dead. And, he starts going up to the front door. And, it's one of those old school handles where you got to lift up and turn. And as he's doing it, Erin's like trying to come up, and she's like, no, don't. And you got to remember, she still had that trap set with the axe. So he opens the door, then the twine comes loose, the axe comes flying, and the officer's just looking up like, oh shit, whack! And as it hits the officer, then it ends the film and it says, you're next. Great fucking film. A lot of scenes I really did not expect in this film. Most importantly, probably the blender scene. I wouldn't have expected that scene where they put a blender on the dude's head and turned it on Felix, and it was just like, whoa. As I said though, this film was made by, individuals who love the horror genre and obviously paid a lot of homage to it. Obviously with the Axe Through the Door with The Shining, the heavy breathing in the mask from Michael Myers. If you look at little tidbits like that, I think that's what gave this film that charm that, not only myself, but everybody in the horror community can enjoy, because it's like, oh shit. In a sense, I guess you could say it almost had a Home Alone feel to it, because this is actually a home invasion film. And that's what it was originally listed as, was a home invasion, because everything all happens at home. But with that being said, I see this film more as a survivalist film, more as a slasher film, and it's very well developed because there's many layers to this story. One, like I said, it shows you little tidbits of each character and who they were. The only ones that you really didn't know too much about was probably the sister Amy, other than the fact that she was the youngest and she was the only girl. So I mean, it's implied that she was almost, I guess you could say, the favorite of the parents, Then you find out that Drake is the oldest, who's kind of jealous of the other brother, Crispin. And Felix was kind of like the one who never achieved much, And it showed that they were all educated except Felix. And, if you pay attention to the story, it tells you all that. And I was really impressed with it. For a slasher film, like, oh shit, it's got a lot of layers to this. And as I said, Simon Barrett, the guy who played the Tiger Mask in this film, he said almost 90% of the script remained unchanged. And, the whole story that he wrote, hardly anything really changed. The only thing that he actually had to change was the opening sequence. And in the original opening sequence, what they were going to plan to do was not Eric and Talia. They were going to do that a dog comes around and follows them and everything. And I don't know if it was the fox mask or the lab mask. They would get pissed off and they would decapitate the dog. And for obvious reasons, they didn't do that. And I'm kind of glad that they didn't do that, because I mean that would just automatically turn off a lot of people with that. So they obviously went with the opening that they had there. But it was in the script that they were going to originally plan to do that. And I'm kind of glad that they didn't, because if you look at films like Cannibal Holocaust and some of these other more brutal horror films, they use actual animals and stuff like that. They imply that animals got hurt, and people weren't too happy about that. So I'm kind of glad that they actually went away with it and did what they did, because it also tied into the story, and it also tied into who Eric was as a neighbor, as a friend, and stuff like that, and how they were all together. But thank you all for tuning in for episode 60 on You're Next, and I will catch you all next time, as always.